that was the hardest 13 months of my life as I worked as a volunteer, but it was also the most rewarding because I had the pleasure of meeting almost every person that we interviewed for the book and hearing their story. And it was just exciting, and it has opened other things. Sharon talked about our website, which I do want to tell you is www.braddockHeritage.org, braddockHeritage.org, because after the book we found there's so much more, and we're continuing to add to it. The transcripts, the entire transcripts of all the people we interviewed are on that website, so you get a taste of them in the book, but you can go on and see more on the website. But there's one of my favorite stories that I would just like to share, and that happened close by. It was at Shirley Gate and Lee Highway. Did you know that we had German prisoners of war located there at an old road construction camp? You know, back in the old days they had road gangs and they had to house them somewhere, and so that's what the camp had been used for until June of 1945. We still had German prisoners here in the United States, and they put them in a camp there. And they decided to use them as a workforce. Well, what was needed here was farmhands, because the men were off at the war, and we were a big dairy farm area. So farmers or members of the family could come to the road camp, pick up a small crew, 2 to 3 men, and have them come work out on their farms. The county set up regulations. They had to be paid 35 cents an hour. Think about that. 35 cents an hour. You were not to speak to them, which was kind of easy because most people didn't speak German. Okay? You were not to feed them. They came with a sandwich from the camp. And a lot of people broke that rule. And you were not to fraternize with them. No summer of my German soldiers. Okay? I'd just like to tell you 2 of the people I interviewed, their specific story involving those German soldiers. One young man remembered his mother broke the rule and invited the crew to have lunch with the family. Now, I think these are, enemies of the United States, but they've been working on the farm all day. So she ignored the fact that they had a sandwich and they had lunch with them. And he remembers, his name is Lee Hubbard, he remembers very specifically how one of the German soldiers gestured to his mother, could he have a spoonful of sugar to put in his milk? And she figured out what he wanted, and she said yes. And nowadays we don't think much about that, but besides the fact that he was an enemy, remember that sugar was rationed in World War II. So not only was she sharing the table with enemies, but also sharing something that's very precious to the family. Now, another man, Lynn Bryce, was only 6 years old during this time period, living in Clifton. And, of course, all around the whole area, these crews were going out and being used. And he remembers that they would bring the soldiers in to Clifton under guard. Now, when they went to the farms, they were not under guard, because where are they going to run? Okay? But when they were brought into Clifton, they were under guard, and they were brought into the general store to use their 35 cents an hour to whatever they wanted. And he remembers as a young man being terrified of these soldiers these prisoners, because someone spread the rumor that they ate little children. And so as a 6-year-old, he was terrified. But you know what? It must have been 60 years later, as he was being interviewed, I still felt that childhood fear. And that's the beauty of doing interviews. I mean, to have someone to relate that and be able to feel it and hear it in his voice, even though it happened so many years before that. So it was a delight, and everybody, Sharon strikes fear in my heart when she talks about sequels to our book, because there's lots of people we have missed, and that's something we would like to think about. Is there's some people that, of course, we would like to go back and get their interviews too. Okay.